You're listening to the Very Refreshing Podcast with Dylan Hamar and Alek Jetzel. It's delicious. It's very refreshing.
Woo! It's hot in here. All right. Welcome back to episode 11 of the Very Refreshing Podcast. I'm Dylan Hamar, and I'm here with my co-host,
Alek Jetzel.
Alek, how the heck you been?
It's been good. It's been good. I'm excited to be back recording a couple of these. No one would know this, but we recorded a handful of our episodes, and then we released, and now we're getting back to record these final two. So it's exciting to be back in the studio with you, recording. It's going to be a couple good episodes to finish it off.
Yeah, a couple being 10.
Yeah, when I say we recorded a handful to start, I mean we recorded the first 10.
Yeah. And so we haven't sat down and recorded for probably, I don't know, like 2.5 months.
Yeah, it's been at least 2 months.
My goodness sakes.
We're shaking the rust off. Hopefully we didn't lose all of the progress we made by recording and getting better at it.
Yeah, our pimp juice. You know that Nelly song? She only want me for my pimp juice. Oh,
I was thinking about this. This might be a hot take. Me and Carrie heard Man Eater by Nelly Furtado. He's a man eater and you wanna earn. Dude, hot take. Nelly Furtado is better than Nelly.
I don't know if I don't know if I've ever heard that discussion happen before. Because, they share the name.
They're both named Nelly.
Yeah.
These are the conversations that people should be having.
I know, but
we're
not.
Finally having them.
Yeah. So, so what's been happening in the past 2.5 months? I mean, obviously, you're always playing basketball. You hurt your knee. What else happened?
Did I hurt my knee? Oh, yeah. I had some guy try to jump for a rebound, and he jumped right into me, and we clacked knees. So, but it only hurt me for a day and a half. It wasn't too bad. But yeah, playing a lot of basketball. It's summertime, so it's nice and hot outside. And I'm still white as a ghost. I don't get any sun. So,
if something isn't a knee slapper, is it a knee clapper?
A knee
or
clapper.
You said knee clacker. Clacking?
Yeah, we clacked knees.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, just business as usual. But yeah, 2.5 months it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And big thanks to everybody who's been listening. We've had a couple of regular listeners that have given us some great feedback. I know my dad is one of our biggest fans. I call him and have a conversation about each episode. So happy that, people have been listening. Really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun hearing people give us feedback.
Yeah. When you do a podcast that doesn't have a theme,
Yeah.
Because podcasts have themes, right? It's how your podcast gets categorized on the applications, whether it be film and animation or video games or pop culture or just entertainment. It's really hard to categorize what we do just because every episode is just geared towards something else. It does kind of fit into nerddom.
Yeah.
However, I don't know. It's so drastically different. And most of the times you're kind of shooting your podcast in the foot when you do it that way, just because people like consistency. It's I'm going to go to podcast X because I'm getting the news, or I'm going to go to this podcast because, they're giving me, maybe backstories about comic books or whatever, or Dungeons and Dragons
about something, or
yeah,
I'm gonna laugh on this podcast. Yeah, you're right.
But it's if we had catered to the Seinfeld fans, I think in episode 3, what are the chances that Seinfeld fans are also going to be fans of, I don't know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably likely just because those are two humongous things, but we've talked about other things that might not, we might be, I don't know, alienating some groups.
Yeah.
But if you're going to subscribe
we decided to do it that way,
Well, yeah.
We had kicked around a couple of formats where we would be a little bit more specific, but like it says in our, in the bio, the summary of it, we just like all the things, so we wanted to talk about all the things, And in the future, if we sit down and try a season 2 or try another go at it, maybe we'll get more specific so we can capture a niche, like you said. But for the time being, it's just been fun talking about whatever.
I know it had. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And
I think I said this in the very first episode. this is what our conversations are when they're not being recorded. When we sit on your couch or my couch and just talk, we run the gambit. We talk about a bunch of different things. So
it's true.
This podcast really mirrors our conversations outside of the podcast as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's very natural. And getting to the tail end here, our last 2 episodes, are, well, I don't want to reveal next week's necessarily, but this week we're going to be talking about action movies. Now, anyone that knows me knows that I'm not the biggest fan of action movies in 2023, but you are like, in my opinion, an action like aficionado. You love to have fun. You love popcorn movies.
Sure.
You're very big into just having a great time at the at the movie theaters or wherever you catch them. And I'm a little hesitant just because. Well, I guess I don't really know why.
Yeah. Well, I think it has to do with, what we were raised on. You typically gravitate to that, right? So whereas your parents were showing you Halloween and those old school like horror flicks, whenever me and my family would sit down to watch a movie, when we got the DVD, it was an action flick. It was an espionage flick. It was something like that. So I gravitate, to that because it's what I was raised on, right? And whereas you have a back catalog of a certain genre in your, mental Rolodex, I've got the action back catalog in my mental Rolodex, and that's why I love it so much.
What do you think, if you were to, like, okay, let's just say that you are you're working for the FBI.
Okay.
And you need to do a really comprehensive makeup of an action fan. What are some attributes like how would you guys be able to identify each other?
Like a profile?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh. If I'm going to profile an action fan, it's funny you say work for FBI. I know you know this, but our listeners wouldn't know this. One of the first places I interviewed for right out of college was with the FBI.
And you were doing pretty well with that, right?
It was going to be a desk job. I got through the first few interviews. I had a lie detector test. And then at a certain point, it kind of fizzled out. It didn't seem like it was what I wanted to do. But for all of our listeners that don't know this, I was being recruited by the FBI to work a desk job, which was an interesting experience. Like I said, in the long run, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. But okay, back to your question.
Are you allowed to talk about that?
I was never told anything that.
Did you sign anything?
No. I mean, other than I don't think I signed anything.
Alek's going to be leaving the studio. He's going to be shot with a blow dart, and he's going to turn into a puddle of water.
Yeah. There's a black Escalade that just pulled up outside of the office, and they're going to ask, "Come with us, please, sir."
Yeah, and it's not Ice Cube.
Yeah, which is how a lot of action movies sometimes go. Just kidding. Anyway, so if I were to profile an action fan, that's hard to say because I feel like it appeals to a lot of different people, right? In the way that, and like. I'm a huge action fan, so I know that the generalization about action movies is, like you said, popcorn movies, right? It's almost like the pop music of movies, right? And I think there's much more to it than that, right? There's much more artistry to it than that, and we'll get into that a little bit. But action movies really appeal to such a wide variety of audiences, But I don't know if I was going to like really, really try hard to dig down and categorize action fans, I would probably say someone like me. I don't know, like and what I mean is, and we'll get into this a little bit more also, I know why I like action movies. Like, other than I was raised on them, I know that, the action hero calls to like a primitive masculine energy within me, right? Where I'm like, oh, cool car, big muscles, nice suit, pretty woman on his hip. Like that, it calls to that like masculine energy within me, right? So if I was going to like try to profile an action fan, I would say, I don't know, somebody who maybe likes more of the masculine things in life than the average dude does,
I have a question with that.
Sure.
So, you said the term primitive, right? Like when society talks about primitive things, it's usually like, duh, caveman, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that here's my take, okay? And we're gonna have to flip this around on me at some point because there is a parallel between action and horror in the sense that we both overlook some of our genre's shortcomings, and we're okay with that. We're very forgiving. We're understanding. Do you think that, since you use the term primitive, do you think that your run-of-the-mill action fan is lacking in, I don't know, are they lacking in, like, artistic versatility, or are they like the most artistic, versatile people? Does it take a lot of artistic nature to forgive, or does it lack artistic nature to forgive so much?
I'm not going to say like that it lacks artistic nature, but here's what I will say, right? And I'm going to bring up my dad a couple of times, right? Because he raised me on action movies. We've talked about action movies to death, me and him. He always says, if I'm entertained and I don't look at my watch or I don't look at my phone, then it's good to go for me, right? My dad is not an aficionado. He's not a film guy, right? And, you know, I don't want to project that I'm a film guy either, other than I've made a couple of films with you and our team. But I think the typical action movie fan, they don't, like, they get just as much pleasure out of the worst action movie and the best action movie, right? And so it's not that they're like lacking artistic distinguishment. It's just that it fulfills that entertainment, right? All I'm trying to do when I watch this movie is be entertained. So if it's entertaining me, I'm satisfied. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, it's not like a lack of artistic vision or a lack of artistic know-how. It's more of just, I don't know. It's like, the best thing I can think to like explain it to, is to compare it to, is like, you have a lot of people who are foodies, you know, self-proclaimed foodies running around. And I think foodie is cap. I think foodies aren't real.
We're all foodies.
Well, here's what I'm saying, right? The dude who's like, oh my gosh, don't eat that Chinese place because this Chinese place is way better. And I'm like, they're all the same. You know, it's like, are you really getting that much more fulfillment out of a $25 Chinese place as you are a $15? You know what I mean? People try to pretend like there's so much extra value by spending more money on their food, when I think it's like, it just like I said, it fulfills that base that I need. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like two. Yeah, definitely. There's like even
action fans are lacking pretentiousness. You know what I mean? Like, at least at their core, right? And you know, I don't say pretentious to try to project that on somebody else, but it fulfills what a movie is supposed to be, which is entertainment. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense or not. And maybe that comparison was a little too off base, but
no. And even when it comes to foodies, like, there's two different, I don't know, they're not foodies, but just like people with their food. It either comes down to, like, I don't know, the utmost quality, or people that just like to get a lot for their buck.
Yeah.
And a lot could be quantity.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be, you know, and that correlates again to the like films, right? Like, sometimes we don't always get the highest quality of films, but if it has a lot of something, we walk away satiated, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I always just think of my dad. It's like, I watch a movie to be entertained, you know, not to feel something, not to marvel at the artistic nature of it. I just want to be entertained because that's what movies are to me, is entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of, and we're obviously overgeneralizing with this part of the discussion, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
There are action fans who, like you said, are the most base level. I just want to be entertained. But then, you know, there are 99% on Rotten Tomato action movies that are artistic visions. You know what I mean? Like, there's, and it's the same in every genre, horror, whatever it be. You know, there is like the cream of the crop and the cream of the not. You know what I mean? Like,
well, and just to be clear, I don't look at action movies as lacking inspiration, talent, or art.
Yeah.
I just know that, like, in general, film, like, the pretentious film community definitely does.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and like, to me personally, like, I don't get defensive until until an action fan goes in on my genre.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, do you have the space to talk, dude?
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, come on, man.
It's like someone being like, horror is meh. I don't like horror. Oh, yeah? What was your favorite movie of the year? The new Fast and Furious.
Yeah,
it's like, all right, buddy.
I don't know. I just think like... I just think that like Ari Aster movies are like, I don't know, they're just like lacking in oomph. It's like, oh yeah, what did you like so much this year? John Wick 4.
John Wick 4,
yeah.
Which is a dope movie.
Sure.
You know, you're right. It's what we talked about in the fandom episode. It's like that gatekeeping of like, my thing is superior to your thing because it's my thing. It's pretty silly. It's pretty silly.
Yeah. So, I don't know when you, again, I know I'm throwing questions at you,
No,
and
okay.
that's primarily because you're like the resident action person.
Yeah.
You're our RA, right?
Resident action.
Yeah, resident action, resident Affleck.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to it, like, when you get into action, you mentioned that your dad, your family, like you guys would watch those popcorn movies together.
Sure. Uh-huh.
What are some of the first memories you have of action movies? What are some that like you saw and you're like, oh, this is something that I really love? Not just because it's like influence from my parents, but I love this too.
Yeah, well, the easiest answer to that is the espionage movies, right? So we're talking the James Bonds, the Mission Impossibles, for a little bit the Jason Bourne movies. Like, those are the ones that I have the fondest memories of with my family and my parents. Like, when the new Bond movie came out or when the new Mission Impossible movie came out, it was like, let's get to the theater. We got to go see it. And then when the DVD came out, we talked about collecting and how we each have like our own little DVD collections. I don't know, you may not know this, that little, you've been to our house. There's like the TV and then there's like a blue entertainment center underneath it. If you open those cupboards, it's chock full of DVDs.
I didn't know that. I know you have that stack shelf on the right side of your TV.
Yeah. Oh, I mean at my parents' house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I see the one at your house, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah.
I have a little
movies.
stack shelf, but then the cupboards, same thing. The cupboards are filled. But if you go to my parents' house, you open that thing and it's stacked full of DVDs. Most of them being action flicks, right? And espionage movies. So yeah, I remember watching the first Mission Impossible movie and it just blowing my mind, I think maybe one of the first Bond movies I watched was Pierce Brosnan was the Bond when I was a kid. So I remember watching GoldenEye and all those movies, and my love of Bond has continued through Daniel Craig's run recently.
And your love of Mission Impossible has continued as well.
It's super strong to this day for sure. Yeah. I have especially in an action series, an action franchise, you have so many movies, and there's ones that you like more than others. There's strong ones, there's weak ones, but you kind of lump them all together as this thing that you really, really enjoy. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any other specifics. Those are the ones that I remember the most. I do remember we talked about this in another episode. You're like, I'm trying to remember what movie we were talking about. It was one of those movies that my dad waited until like late at night when my mom had already gone to bed, and he let us stay up late and watch like maybe a little bit of a racy movie that, was a little bit beyond our years. But I remember staying up late to watch Terminator 2 one night, which is like in my top 5 movies.
That's the one.
It's the holy grail of action movies. Like, that's one of the best action movies of all time. And it's like an incredible movie by itself, regardless of genre. So I remember that one. I remember watching the Rambo movies late at night, I've talked about compilation DVDs a bunch. My dad pulled it out and he found like all 4 of at the time it was only 3 Rambo movies that we watched over a couple weekends. What do you remember watching any movies like that when you were a kid?
Oh yeah.
What's on your list of things?
So like I watched Terminator 2 religiously. I actually saw Terminator 2 before the first one.
Same.
And I'm a huge fan of that first movie.
Oh yeah.
But Terminator 2 is like, I don't know, man. It's like
the perfection of the formula.
It's so good, and it's like arguably the best sequel of all time. That's
yeah. It's like Terminator 2, Empire Strikes Back, The Godfather. It's like right up there with sequels.
Oh, absolutely. It's like tip top of the list. You had a great villain. You had Arnold.
Oh, dude, the T-1000.
Oh yeah,
liquid
Robert
metal.
Patrick is yeah, and then you had Arnold now is the good guy defending John Connor.
Yeah, yeah.
Sarah Connor's still skeptical of him. There's a lot of lore that carries over from that first movie.
Edward Furlong turning in like oh, it's the best, dude.
And also when it comes to action movies at a young age, like it's so funny because a lot of the Schwarzenegger and Stallone movies, I'm a huge Stallone fan.
Yeah.
Like I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Stallone is like
If you had to pick between the two,
I'm a Stallone fan.
Stallone, really? Do you think it's Rocky that sets him over the edge?
Well, that's what I was going to get into, right? Because like most of Stallone's franchises start very humble and small, and then they grow into like these like Goliaths that have a lot of action influence. It's like, I think I saw Rambo 3 before I saw First Blood 1 and 2.
Really?
Yeah. So like to me, I'm like thinking as a kid, I'm like, oh, John Rambo is this action star, but then you go back and you watch the first movie, and the first movie is like very much like a sad movie.
Yeah. It's
You know?
much more drama than it is action.
It's very rooted and it's very grounded and
Yeah, because by the third one, he was all pumped up on steroids and sniping dudes with a bow and arrow. And you go back to First Blood, and he's really humble, just like, yeah, you're right. That's really interesting. Yeah, his franchises do kind of act that way. Because you mentioned Rocky, obviously starts from super humble beginnings, doesn't even win at the end of that fight. And then by Rocky 4 and 5, he's on top of the mountain, right? That's interesting. I hadn't really thought of it that way. Yeah, so you had
I had Rambo 3.
Yeah.
So I mentioned like Rambo 3 prior to Rambo 1. But then it's like, I know this is like blasphemy to say. I'm pretty sure the first Rocky movie I saw was like 3 or 4. Maybe.
Yeah.
And then I went, I don't think I saw the first Rocky until maybe like I was 11 or 12. And the first one, just like, I don't know, that movie is so special, you know? And I know a lot of people, a lot of the Rocky, and I only bring up Rocky because Rocky, while it's not like definitively an action movie, boxing is action, right?
Boxing, yeah, it's...
So when it comes down to it, like you have like villains, Rocky starts to have villains, right? And it's like, you want to see like your hero take down a villain. That's like at the core action, right?
Yeah.
However, when you watch Rocky 1 and even Rocky 2, and especially Rocky 3 and 4, you know what? Let's just say all the Rockies. you love Apollo Creed.
Yeah.
You know, the first movie, you're like, this guy's kind of full of himself and he thinks Rocky's a bum and all this stuff. And he can't, like, they rematch in the second one and he doesn't believe that Rocky is good enough to have a close call with him and all these things. You sort of get Apollo.
Yeah.
But then you get into Clubber Lang and then you get into Ivan Drago. And I'm sorry, regardless of how Rocky 5 started, Tommy the Machine Gun, by the end of that movie, that guy was a jerk. And and you saw Rocky beat him up on the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
what's that line you love? You push him down. You want to try to push me down.
Yeah, so Tommy Gunn comes into the bar and Paulie goes, hey, if it wasn't for Rocky, you'd be nothing. You know, and then Tommy pushes him down. Or he punches him, and like Paulie's mouth is like bleeding, and then Rocky like goes, "Hey, Paulie, you all right?" And he looks over at Tommy and he goes, "You push him down. You want to start pushing me down?" And every time I hear that, I'm like, "Yes, beat him up."
Yeah.
And then there's like that scene where they're out in the street. Sorry, I'm gonna praise Rocky 5 for a second.
Unsung hero.
There's that scene in There's that scene in the street where Tommy just beats Rocky to a pulp as Rocky movies go. And Rocky's like almost knocked unconscious. And at this point, you know, Mickey died in the third movie.
Yeah.
And he almost has that like vision of Mickey talking to him. And then Mickey goes, "Get up, you son of a he goes, Rocky's just like on the pavement. And then you hear, "Get up, you son of a because Mickey loves you." And then you hear, and then he like gets up and he proceeds to beat the ever-loving crap out of Tommy Gunn.
Yep. Plus Rocky 5. So I'll just interject. Rocky 4 is the top of the mountain for me, you know, and it's because of Ivan Drago, right?
I think it's not my favorite Rocky movie, but I love it so freaking much.
It's so much fun.
I can't even put that and Rocky 1 in the same class. Not because one's better than the other. They're just so different.
They're so different. So Rocky 5 picks up right where Rocky 4 ends, right? And it's Rocky going into the shower after having just been beat nearly to death by Ivan Drago, right? He won, but nearly beaten to death. And he goes into the shower and he starts to shower and all the blood is like pouring off of him. And then he does he like faint or like stumble? But he becomes very aware that something is very wrong with his brain after having fought Ivan.
Yeah. And again, it ties into the lore of like Rocky had an eye injury.
Yeah.
And like people have been telling him for multiple films he needs to stop boxing.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's like in the shower and it becomes very apparent that boxing from here on out is going to be very dangerous for him. He's damaged from boxing.
Well, in Rocky 5, he doesn't box at all.
Yeah. And it's so, dude, that scene of him in the shower just becoming aware of where he's at is so heartbreaking. It's like, it's pivotal. It's like so important to the character of Rocky. And it happens in the movie that everyone thinks is really terrible.
Yeah,
so I just need to sing praises of that scene.
I mean, it has a lot of problems. I think I feel bad speaking about him this way because I think that was actually Stallone's son in the movie.
Oh yeah.
He wasn't the best. I know he tragically passed away, but I don't know. I just think the whole angle of like the kid learning to fight to fix his problems is like really counterproductive because in the first movie, Rocky is using his words to encourage the youth. The only reason Rocky fights is because he has nothing else.
Yeah.
Whereas like his son is not in that situation. His son is not Rocky. His son is not like a moron or a bum or like someone that's super slow. But like in the movie, he's learning to fight to beat up the bullies at school. And it's like almost like it kind of takes away from like the point of Rocky.
Yeah.
Rocky is about heart. And sometimes like the most heart comes from not fighting at all.
Yeah. And Rocky's whole character is like, I fight so that the people I love don't have to.
Yeah.
Which is like such an inspiring thing, you know, like, yeah, it's like I don't know. People always mention the American dream, you know, and I think a lot of people think it has to do more with money and wealth. But I think the American dream is really like I slave and I like work my butt off and I fight so that my kids can have it better than I did. That's what it more means to me.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, a lot of
dude, thank the big man for Rocky, dude.
Oh, Rocky's so great.
Inspiring.
It's so great. It's like, I remember, sorry, this isn't the Rocky episode, but I remember seeing that first movie, like I said, at the age of 11 and 12. And it like, this has been echoed a million times. Rocky 1 is not about winning. Rocky 1 is about doing your best.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. He is like a crony for like a criminal. He's like, you know, Rocky doesn't want to beat people up to collect debts. He's like a sweet guy. He meets Adrian, who works at the pet shop. He's not even considered a good fighter. He's like losing a lot. And then he goes to Mickey to train him. And then Mickey's like, you got the heart of a fighter, Rock, but you fight like an ape, you know, kind of thing. And it's like, it's inspiring because like as a kid, I watched it and I was like, man, Rocky 1, because you watch Rocky 2 and on, Rocky wins the fights, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like the reality is that like there's a lot of loss that happens in Rocky 3 and in Rocky 4, but like Rocky perseveres in the third act and Rocky loses in the first movie.
Yeah.
Right? He beats Apollo in the second one, but then after that, he wins every fight.
Yeah, he's the champ after that.
So the thing is like the first one is like you see him lose to the champion, Apollo Creed, and then he's screaming, Adrian, we did it. We did it. You know, and it's just like,
can you imagine? Like I wasn't around for this, but like imagine like going to see Rocky in theater and thinking it's going to be like everything you had ever seen where Rocky wins at the end. And
well,
then
we're talking, what is it, 79?
something like that.
So
yeah.
the reality is that there wasn't like too much of a, I mean, I know like, Bruce Lee movies and stuff, he always wins. So you're right.
Yeah.
But
I'm not saying just for like fighting or sports movies, but movies in general follow a pretty safe formula where the good guy wins, right? We talked about it with Infinity War. It was so jarring that like Thanos won. Imagine going to the theater in 1979 to see Rocky, just anticipating that he's going to win because that's how movies go, and then he doesn't, and still loving the movie and still having that like feeling of inspiration. It's pretty cool.
Well, and while you can live vicariously through a winner, people more often than not have more failures than they have wins, especially if you're aspiring to win, you lose a lot to get there. And that doesn't necessarily mean like competitively lose, but you lose people, you lose maybe jobs, relationships, what have you. And we can live vicariously through winners. But the great thing is like when you see someone try their best and they're still proud, even though they don't cross the ribbon first.
Yeah.
And that's why Rocky 1 is so special. But getting back to action.
Yeah. By the way, no qualms at all. I'm glad we had that Rocky discussion.
No, me too. Because Rocky means a lot to me.
Yeah.
I'm like a huge Rocky fan.
Yeah.
And while I love like the bombastic US versus Russia of Rocky 4, and it was just like, it's so epic.
Yeah.
And
best
montages in the whole movie. And like, it's just a great film. They're all great.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, there's such a humbleness and like small natured spirit to the first one that just like screams to me more.
Yeah.
And I think most Rocky fans would say that Rocky 1 is the GOAT.
Sure.
But all Rocky fans will also tell you that Rocky 4 is a blast to watch.
Yeah. You're right.
It's so much fun to watch. Like,
you're right.
But when it comes to action also,
What else do you have in your catalog?
I'm actually going to throw in something kind of weird.
Okay.
Because again, like Alek is going to give us like the answers that we want, right? Where it's like, Alek, what did you watch? It's like, I watched GoldenEye and this and that. And they're gonna be like, yeah, that's like where his love started and it's just spiraled and spitballed. My exposure to action was always like kind of weird. Like you know this, I'm a big fan of Cobra, the movie Cobra.
Yeah.
And
we watched that a few weeks ago together.
Yeah, I showed you Cobra,
Yeah.
or maybe you had seen it prior.
I think I'd seen pieces of it, but it was the first like sit down through watch.
And it's a Stallone movie,
Mhm.
and he plays this cop named Marion Cobretti, and Cobra. And it's like the most like stereotypical cop movie you've ever seen, but it's cool because it has a lot of horror elements to it.
Yeah, the bad guy is this like
cult leader.
He's like this Michael Myers type, just hulking figure that's like breaking down doors and stuff.
And he's killing women.
Yeah.
And Cobra ain't having none of that.
No.
And it's
dude, aviator
and
sunglasses
and
all.
Poppy from Seinfeld is his like co-cop or whatever.
Dude.
His partner is Poppy. Poppy peed on my couch.
Yeah,
Like
Poppy's been sloppy.
Yeah. So I was a huge fan of Cobra, but really my biggest exposure to action, there's the obvious answers like Power Rangers and things like that. I might have mentioned this early on in the podcast, but I grew up being like a die-hard wrestling fan.
So it's funny that you say that because I had planned on asking you about that.
Really?
That was like the thing because we had talked about this episode before and I wanted to make sure there was back and forth even though I like action so much. I was going to ask you because, dude, professional wrestling is almost like an action soap opera.
That's exactly what it is.
So I wanted to ask you about that, right? Like, so what was your first experience with watching wrestling? Like, can you remember like... I'm sure you could rattle off all your favorite wrestlers and stuff, but what's that like first experience you had with watching wrestling?
Well, my brother.
So
yeah.
Let me say this real quick, right? I did not grow up on wrestling, right? And there's this really, really lame thing that people say where they're like, "Don't you realize it's fake?"
Duh.
Right? And maybe for a while I fell into that category, but I've watched clips with you. The storylines may be scripted, but the athleticism is real, bro. Those dudes are high level athletes.
It's a circus.
And everything they're doing is like, it's real. And if you listen to interviews with like retired wrestlers and they tell you about their injuries and all the stuff that they went through, that stuff is, it's scripted. It's like the ballet. It's like the circus, right? It's all supposed to happen a certain way, but that athleticism is real, bro.
Well, a lot of people think that like, wrestlers and bodybuilders are very like, synonymous with each other.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think that a lot of wrestlers die from heart attacks. A lot of wrestlers die from drug abuse. And the reality is that they get hooked on painkillers because they're in so much pain. You like you said, you hear a wrestler rattle it off. It's crazy. But
yeah, having to go from city to city, show to show
every night,
a few days of turnaround. We talked about basketball. If I don't have 6 Tylenol, I can't play the next week, right?
Yeah.
Or the next couple of days.
But these people are on like Norcos and stuff, and
wild,
like every day, and they're taking like muscle relaxers, and then they're introducing alcohol, and then they pass away at a really young age because of it. But as a kid, my brother had a lot of it's obviously WWE, but it used to be the World Wrestling Federation, WWF. He had a lot of VHS tapes that had like the highlight matches. So at a very young age in the early 90s, I was watching a lot of like early WrestleMania clips, like the first time Hulk Hogan freaking suplexed Andre the Giant, right? And the thing was like, we know now, it's no surprise that Hulk Hogan really turned out to not be the best dude. But as a kid, seeing this dude tell you to take your vitamins and say your prayers and you're a Hulkamaniac. As a kid being told that I was a Hulkamaniac, I was like, I'm a Hulkamaniac. Like if I take my vitamins, if I say my prayers, if I do good in school and if I avoid drugs, I can be like Hulk Hogan. And I could be the American hero, his theme song, I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man.
It's interesting that you say that like Hulkamania or Hulk, Hulk
dude, Hulkamania was running wild, brother.
The fact that,
yeah,
the fact that he inspired you, that's the way that I feel about action stars. You know what I mean? Like, the reason I go to the gym, right? The reason I try to be athletic and the reason I try to dress a certain way or try to have like a coolish kind of car is because of like the projection I have to be, this suave dude that can do anything, that can save the world, right? And it's interesting that, I've made a couple of like short films with you. And I don't want to be delusional about my trajectory of that. But part of me is sometimes when I'm working out is like, oh, I'm doing this so that one day I can be an action star. I don't truly believe that. But there's sometimes when I'm hitting sets and I'm like, this is so that I can be like one of the actors that plays Bond or one of the actors that plays this guy. There's definitely like a projection that I put when I watch an action movie. I'm like, I'm that guy. I'm the strong dude that can do these different things.
Yeah, and I think that's like the psychology of it, right? It's just that's entertainment in general, right?
Yeah.
It's like observing like this situation play out that you wish you could be a part of, and you're like pretending that it's you and you're victorious and you're helpful and you're I don't know, you're virtuous.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, again, it wasn't just Hulk Hogan, it was Bret Hart. Like Bret the Hitman Hart was like he's my favorite wrestler of all time.
Yeah.
And seeing him come out to the ring and give his sunglasses to a little kid in the front row, I was like, I want to be that kid.
Yeah.
And then like Bret Hart's intro is like, like that guitar hits and then there's this little kid that goes, Bret! And then it zooms in on Bret, and then it shows the kid, and he goes, "Go get him, champ!" And then Bret Hart comes out, and just like he's carrying an American or a Canadian flag, and he's going out there, and he's like fighting for all the kids, and he's fighting for good, and he's fighting for purity, and all these things.
Yeah.
And this is gonna sound weird, bro, but I think I didn't get into partying and anything like that until I was 18 or so. I think wrestling had a huge hand in like keeping me a very clean kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
because I was so inspired by like the good nature of it. And a lot of those characters, like I said, Hulk Hogan before, it was like, you're a Hulkamaniac, you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, I'm a Hulkamaniac. And that sounds so goofy to say, but like it was beautiful to be a part of something. Like
Yeah, get it where you can get it, man. I love that.
And then obviously into the late 90s, the Attitude Era happened. And then the bad guys became the cool ones.
The cool ones.
You know, there's that Austin 316 said, I just whipped your ass, you know. And people were cheering it on, but I was a Jake Roberts fan and I was feeling sad on that.
Yeah.
You know?
You're like, no, it doesn't. It's John 316.
I was I was like, Jake Roberts is not a has-been. Don't make him get that piece of crap out of my ring, you know? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, it's Jake the Snake. He's an icon. Don't treat him that way.
Yeah.
And the whole crowd is cheering it on, you know?
Like,
so the good guys had
yeah.
an uphill battle, but I was in the
Yeah.
trenches with them. Everyone was like, yeah, you know, The Rock and, you know, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I'm like, no, Bret Hart, Brian Pillman,
Yeah.
the British Bulldog. I mean, Bret Hart did become a villain later, and so did Hulk Hogan when he went to WCW. But me, I was still rooting for the good guys, even though it wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Kids at school were like, Stone Cold. And I'm like, Stone Cold is mean.
Is mean.
He's a mean
And, you know,
head.
like, back to the original question that you asked me about, like, you know, action fans and what is it that speaks about action is that, like, I don't know, like, when you go to see a Bond movie or when you go to see, you know, just a straightforward action movie, even the Fast and Furious movies to a certain, you know, it's like, sorry to anybody who's like huge on the Fast and Furious. That's like the lowest hanging fruit as far as action movies go. So we tend to like beef on it a little bit.
Well, there's some of the only ones that really come to cinemas.
Yeah.
It's that, it's Bond,
They're
it's
still
Mission,
making money.
it's Mission Impossible, and John Wick.
Yeah, John Wick is huge right now. But what I was saying is like, when you go to see an action movie, there's a clear-cut good guy, there's a clear-cut bad guy, and the good guy is going to beat the bad guy at the end, right? Whereas when you watch, you know, movies that are, you know, billed as dramas, right? Those genres like make their bread and butter on making characters who are gray, right? Characters who have moral ambiguity and don't know what they're supposed to do, right? So it's like, as interesting and artistic and really like powerful as those movies can be, it's very satisfying to go to a movie knowing exactly who the good guy is and exactly who the bad guy is and knowing that the good guy is going to win at the end. It's just like, I don't want to say easy because that sounds, there's kind of a negative connotation to that, but it's entertainment at its best. And that's what WWE is and was. It's like it's just pure entertainment. That's all it's meant to be.
Well, and it's it's a resolve, it's closure, it's seeing good trample evil, you know, and that feels so good. It feels so good to, I don't know, it feels good to be inspired and motivated. And people don't want to admit this, but like, there's all those memes where it's like you're leaving an action movie and it's like me thinking I'm the main character in my own movie. Like you get pumped up, like your chest puffs out and you're like, I'm going to go save the world tonight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, every time I leave, you know, a Bond movie or a Mission Impossible movie, my next meal is super healthy and I work out super hard the next workout. You know, like, it's like, this is where I change now. Now is when I become like that guy, you know?
Like, this is super embarrassing to say, but I remember being like, I think I was 11 or 12 when eBay really blew up. And I was a huge Michael Keaton Batman fan, still am. There you go. While that movie's not like the most action-packed, it's still an action movie.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was seeing all these people make like latex Batman costumes and selling them on eBay. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, God, how cool would it be if I just bought one of those suits and then I snuck out of my window and went and fought crime at night?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like seeing them on eBay and I'm like, I should buy this latex suit and I should go fight in the shadows at night.
It was like,
even though I would have got my butt kicked and I would have been shot. Like, that's the reality.
Yeah. Or like when you, this is going to be a deep cut for anybody. When you watch The Three Ninjas as a kid, I don't know if any of our listeners remember Three Ninjas. It was like this action comedy where a grandpa trains his three grandsons in the art of ninjutsu, and then they beat up adults the entire movie. So you watch that movie, you watch a Three Ninjas movie, and you're like, oh yeah, I could take a I could take a 250.
Let's murderize him.
I could totally take a 250-pound grown man.
You can't.
No, not as a 7-year-old. No
Tum
way.
Tum is a dum dum. He would be so, dude. Tum Tum would be a carcass.
Dude, Tum Tum was also pulling out Three Stooges moves where he's like boink into the dude's eyeballs and stuff.
I know you had to have Rocky. Who's the other one?
Rocky, Colt, and Tum Tum.
Yeah, Rocky, Bullwinkle, and Tum Tum. No, but you.
But at least the two older brothers were doing actual like spin kicks and stuff.
Well,
like
and Tum Tum was like the Tum Tum was like that kid that was on his way to morbid obesity.
He was just eating all the time.
He was always eating,
Yeah.
and like everyone thought it was like great
Yeah.
and stuff. And it's like, dude, Tum Tum's gonna have like, I don't know, an LDL cholesterol count of like 200 milligrams per deciliter by the time he's 14 years old.
But yeah, Tum Tum was not a ninja. He was pulling out eye pokes, and if he kicked anybody, it would be three dudes' heads in a row. You know what I mean? Like, he had total Three Stooges moves. But you're right. Like, you watch an action movie, and you watch some of these movies that, and then you're like, oh, it's the ultimate projection of, I could be like that guy. Or I could do some of the things that he does, you know, and it's just a fun time when that happens.
It's so fun. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of how you sum up action, right? It's fun.
Yeah.
But you know what? Getting back to you, because obviously I mentioned some of my favorites. I mean, you get Stallone movies, I'm in. You get Schwarzenegger movies, I'm in. Like, I love that stuff, right? Like, I am a huge Sylvester Stallone fan. Like, it's ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, over the top, like literally any movie, cliffhanger, like I'm in, okay?
Yeah.
But then like getting back to you, what are, you mentioned some of the big ones. You mentioned like the Three Wise Men, like the Mission Impossible, the Bond, Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's Jason Bourne. But what are some other action movies, maybe of past or present, that really speak to you and kind of award those sensibilities you've grown up having?
It's like kind of hard to say. I'm talking about being this like action mega fan, and then I'm spacing on all of them. The thing that I've like you said, those staples are always going to be staples. When I'm thinking of like action movies, I think of moments almost more than I think of like movies, right? And when I say moments, I mean like the action movie tropes, like, right, the coolest explosions, the best car chases, like on foot races. And so I think of, and we've also talked about this a little bit too, action, I want to say transcends, but I know that's probably not the right word. Action merges with so many other genres. It's the one that like gets into every other genre, right? So like, especially drama, we have action comedies, right? And you can't talk about action comedy without talking about Jackie Chan, the Rush Hour movies, everything that he ever, Shanghai Noon, like you can't, he's the staple of that genre, right? Action comedy. So I have to mention him. I have to mention those movies, how fun and cool those are.
Well, and there's obviously like a whole discussion you can get into alone, not just on Jackie Chan, but like the quote unquote kung fu martial art movies, right?
Yeah.
I like, it's just great stuntmen, like they're brilliant.
Yeah, like Jackie Chan and his whole crew were circus performers before they were ever filmmakers, right? And it shows, right? It's and that's something that like I think something that's kind of changed in action movie making, right? Is that in the 80s and even before that, maybe not before that, but especially in the 80s, the biggest action stars were, buff. They were athletes.
And we've kind of gotten back to that.
We kind of have, at least the buffness part of it, But what I'm saying is like Arnold was, a bodybuilder, a high level athlete. We had guys like Jean-Claude Van Damme, who was like a legit martial artist.
Dolph Lundgren. Yeah. Like, the dude, was Dolph Lundgren in Universal Soldier? Who was the second guy in Universal Soldier? There were so many of those buff guys.
Dolph and
Jean-Claude.
And Jean-Claude
Yeah,
were in that
okay.
one, right? And even though he's a joke, Steven Seagal right?
Oh, he's a total joke.
He's a joke, but he had martial arts training. Like Chuck Norris is a world champion martial artist, right? Like, and that's something that's changed in action movies is that like you can make a fighting movie nowadays with Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's because there's so much available training to these guys, right? Like Jake Gyllenhaal I love him, but he's not a fighter, you know. He's
the fighter.
He's the fighter. Yeah. He's not a fighter, right? But
no, not the
Mark Wahlberg is the
Southpaw.
fighter. Yeah, yeah. But those kinds of guys can make, you know, believable air quotes, right, boxing movies because they have so much available training, right? And that's kind of changed a little bit. We haven't had like a, you know, I'm sure if you go look at a lot of like indie quote action movies, you do have those dudes that are like truly trained martial artists. Yeah. But the biggest action hero right now is Keanu Reeves is the biggest action hero right now, you know? And I know he's trained his butt off to be as good as he is in those movies, but he's an actor. He's not a martial artist, you know? He's not a he's not any of those things, but it's believable now. And there's all those actors that wanted to be action stars, you know, like that were like, I don't know, like how many action movies did George Clooney make trying to become one of those guys? And
yeah,
none of them
it didn't
worked
work.
out. Yeah, none of them worked, you know. Yeah. Like Denzel has made a couple, and they've been all right, but Denzel is not an action star. He's
Washington,
you know?
is the equalizer.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. But sorry, circling back, I think of moments, right? I think of my favorite chase scenes, right? I think of all of the car stunts in Baby Driver, right? Like the car chase scenes in that movie are other level, right? Yeah, I think of like Ronin, which is not it's a drama action movie. It's a Robert De Niro movie. And I think of like the chase scenes that they have through Paris and how clean and well executed those are. I think of like specific fight scenes, right? I think of The Matrix, and I think of the final fight in the subway between Neo and Agent Smith. I think of those moments more than I think of like the movies. And the movies are good. I focus in on those like action moments as like the ones that I think of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because like those are the moments.
Yeah.
They're the excitement, you know, and while you could have interesting bridges linking those things together, people are stoked on those like fight scenes. They're stoked on those explosions, car chases, foot races, foot chases.
Yeah, me and Carrie, we watched so there's a Netflix movie called Extraction. It's Chris Hemsworth. I don't know if you've seen it or you've seen of it. But it's basically Chris Hemsworth plays this like ex-military guy who gets tasked with going and, you know, getting a kid who was kidnapped, right? Hence the name Extraction, right? Well, they came out with a sequel recently. And there's a scene in that movie that's like this prison riot where he's fighting off prisoners and guards at the same time. And he ends up with a riot shield. And then someone throws like a Molotov cocktail and it explodes on the shield. And then he throws down the shield and his arm is still on fire. And he starts punching dudes with his
with a fire fist.
With a fire fist. And the whole movie was fine. The whole movie was good. But for that moment, him punching dudes out with a flaming arm, I like got up out of my seat and was like cheering, you know? And that hasn't happened in a while.
You started like pacing and dancing around.
Yeah. Oh crap. And I was like, you know, pacing and stuff. I was like out of my seat excited for that moment, you know? Extraction 2 as overall, it will never go into my top favorite movies, but that moment was something else, bro. That was crazy. And it's those things that I cling to in my action movies, you know? Or I think of, you know, this is not a super well-known movie. It was kind of a flop, but a few years back, Guy Ritchie, he made The Man from U.N.C.L.E., right? He made a modern-day version of that TV series, that movie series. And he, you know, true to Guy Ritchie form, he did it in this really awesome stylized, he did like this whole siege like scene that was like silent, and he was doing these interesting like camera out of, you know, order camera. It was just like that moment. I'm like, that stands out. And I'm like, geez, man, I've seen a lot of, you know, army sieging like the island, but I've never seen it done like that. And I think that's what's so like, as generic as action movies can seem to certain people, every now and then you're going to get something that you're like, I've never seen it done that way. And it's so satisfying and so worth it to like finally get to one of those moments, It's so cool.
Oh yeah, it's a huge payoff. I remember, I don't know, it's not an action. I don't know if it's an action movie or not, because I don't really watch a lot of action movies. I went to the theater and I saw Ready Player One. It had action sequences. Yeah. And there's that scene where the kid goes, I choose the form of Gundam. Yeah. And I in the theater, I was like, oh! I was like so excited. Yeah. And then you see like Gundam Wing versus Mecha Godzilla, and then like the Iron Giant is there, and I was just like, when are you ever gonna see this?
I've never seen this before. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I think a lot of other genres, as generic as action has been considered, especially by like the upper echelon of film people, I say it in air quotes, it's kind of looked down on, but every other genre has to steal from action, right? The Departed, right? It's Martin Scorsese's movie that finally won him the Oscar for Best Film. That movie has nothing without the concentrated action and suspense moments that it has littered throughout the movie, right? Like all of Tarantino, he's not an action director, but he has to put action scenes, moments of high intensity, moments of gun shootouts and explosions to like build his movies properly. It's every genre, whether it be, there's action comedies, but horror movies, they all have to use moments of action. Not have to, but they all choose to, in a lot of cases, use moments of action to raise the stakes and make it just add that spectacle to their movie.
Maybe that's why people have such a problem with it. I mean, well, obviously not. Action movies make more than anything else. But
yeah.
Maybe the film community feels a little off about action just because they see it as a tool and not a genre.
Maybe.
And I don't feel that way.
Yeah, not at all.
To me, it's like, I don't care if like something is driven with intensity and fighting and things like that. To me, it's like it's adding value to someone's day, their life, their entertainment, and that's like what movies are.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, I don't know, like I don't always want to feel sad. I don't always want to feel bleak. I don't always want to feel scared or tense or whatever. Sometimes I want to feel like stoked.
Yeah.
When I hear Stallone go, hey, you knocked him down, come try knocking me down now,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Or as goofy as it is, seeing Arnold pin a dude to the wall with a machete and say, stick around, like it's the best, right? Like it's I've said it before.
I swear I will not kill anyone.
You live. Yeah. It's entertainment at its like most purest form. And like I said, there are some movies that really just don't, they do it, like you said, they use the tool, but they don't use it properly, or they don't build an interesting enough story around it. But there are movies that have really nailed it, that really have integrated great stories with great action. Terminator 2 is the best example. So there's, it's looked on as like this kind of like bottom feeder genre, but it makes more money than any other genre. And there are action filmmakers who have really mastered it, and they put it together and they kill it every, you know what I mean?
I think I would like to see more of like in action, and people are going to be like, but this one and this one, I'm not aware of everything action, but the reason that I liked those early action movies, I hear them bad boys coming, can't stop now, I've got to continue my running. Oh,
dang.
Shake
bad boys.
Shake your tail feather.
Can they hear the siren on there, you think?
I mean, if not, that was weird.
We'll edit it out.
I don't know. That was me just like rolling with it.
Yeah.
So,
some policemen just went by.
Yeah. Sirens.
If you couldn't hear the sirens.
Yeah. Remember that Bad Boy song?
From the movie Bad Boys?
Yeah. And it was like Nelly. I hear them bad boys coming. Can't stop now. Got to continue my running. Shake your tail feather. Oh. You don't remember that one?
Speaking of Bad Boys, right? I think a lot of we're kind of like trying to explain why people don't want to talk about action movies. There's like a lot of Bad Boys. There's like some Michael Bay syndrome with action movies. I think some of those like film snobs just look at every action movie as a Michael Bay movie, you know? And they don't realize there's like way more nuance and variety to it than just, you know, the biggest explosion anyone's ever seen and Optimus Prime and Will Smith and Martin. It's not every action movie is a Michael Bay movie.
No. And
I don't say that to crap on him either, because he's made some sweet movies, right? Like there's
Bad Boys is awesome.
Bad Boys is cool, yeah.
Yeah.
He's good at what he does, you know?
Yeah, I would like to see more of the reason I like early action movies is like take Terminator 2 for example. It's not too worldly. So in the first movie you have them like trying to take down, you know, Arnold, but in the second one it's like it's a little out there, it's a little outlandish, it's a little unbelievable. And that's the same thing for like Alien 2, you know, or things like Aliens. But I would like to see action movies that like have like those outlandish unworldly plots that aren't like Transformers.
Yeah, or Star Wars, right?
Yeah. Like I want to see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because when you get into like sci-fi action, it's always like one versus many or many versus many. You know what I mean? But you go back to like some of the roots, like you said, Terminator is 2 versus 1 or 1 versus 1. Predator, you know, with the other Arnold Schwarzenegger's 1v1, you know, it would be really cool to see a science fiction
Well, to
movie.
be fair, they were all against the Terminator. Arnold was the sole survivor.
Oh, of the Predator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. But it would be interesting to see some more, you know, action. And I'm sure they're out there. I just, you know, you would have to dig for them, but to see those 1v1 or, you know, 1v2 or 2v1, you know, it'd be cool to see some, like you said, stripped down action movies. And that's an interesting point too, you know, like I think maybe that's another critique that people have with action is that it's become so grand and so huge that it's unpersonable the way that like a drama is, you know, the way that like a five-man drama is. And that can be true to certain extents, but you know, I've jumped into some old, I have Tubi now. Anybody who's listening that doesn't have Tubi, go get Tubi. It's free. You have to watch it with ads, but it's got a catalog of such like these cool old movies from the 70s and stuff. And so you go back and watch a 70s action movie. The one that I've watched recently is called Thief. It's a Michael Mann movie, and it's so self-contained that people would think it's boring nowadays for sure. But it's like a slow burn. Yeah, but it's so good, and it's you know, like as someone who's made a couple of short films, if I was ever to write my action movie, obviously as a low budget, you know, short film filmmaker, it would be a self-contained, but there's just such a cool variety of action movies, and they deserve a little bit more leeway than I think the general film community gives them credit for.
Yeah, and like I think I said this in a previous episode, there's been this shift with critics where, you know, a long time ago they were like, "Oh, it's the run-of-the-mill action movie," and it's like now they're crapping on art house and they're praising action films. They're praising the blockbusters. You know what I mean? And it's super interesting.
Yeah, to see that like
it's just all contrarian culture.
Yeah, to see that like a Mission Impossible movie is getting like a 95 on Rotten Tomatoes is wild, because that would have, you know, I'm sure that Brian De Palma, the director of the original Mission Impossible, was like, come on, guys. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, now they're getting, and the Mission Impossible movies are awesome, but, you know, there's something about that first one that's so different. And it's like, it's crazy to think that critics are now giving Mission Impossible movies 95% when that original one was like a 70 or something. You know what I mean? The pendulum has definitely swung a certain way.
Well, and the reality is, it's like, I know they've gotten bigger, they've gotten louder, but at the same time, like, you look at the reality, you have great music, you have great shots, great editing, great sequencing, great actors, great characters. Like, why wouldn't a Mission Impossible be deserving of a 95 just because it's action, right? It's still art, and it still deserves, you know, its roses, right? So, yeah, and to me personally, like, I don't even generalize that stuff, because to me, like, when I hear, like, I have too much respect for James Bond to even lump it in with the nonsense. I'm like, oh, that's James Bond. That's prestigious.
It's like cultural, yeah.
Yeah, or even Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible is prestigious, right? or John Wick is becoming more prestigious, but like I don't want to see I don't want to see an action movie where The Rock goes to Afghanistan
or another jungle.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, hey, it's like
the worst Rock impersonation.
He's like, hey, let me tell you something. He goes, there's a man trapped in Afghanistan, and we gotta go get him out.
That's why you're doing WWE.
I'm doing Rocky Maivia.
Yeah, you're not doing Dwayne Johnson. You're doing The Rock.
There is a man in Afghanistan, and we need to go get him out. Give him a helping hand.
Yeah. That's a whole nother genre of action movies that we haven't talked about, like war dramas,
Mm-hmm.
Like, think of Saving Private Ryan, right? Spielberg. Vin
Diesel's in that one.
Yeah, it's an action movie, that's written dramatic. I don't know how to describe it.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, action has just permeated so many other genres. And it's because like it's a really great way of, creating tension and stakes within your movie.
You raise your stakes, you put people on edge, and then there's a moment of doubt.
Yeah.
And then there's a resolution that's satisfying.
Mm.
You know that in the new Mission Impossible movie, that there's going to be a countdown. You know that there's going to be something they have to disarm, and like you've said it yourself a million times, they're going to disarm it like with like
0.1 seconds.
0.1 second on the clock. And even though we know that Dead Reckoning is getting a second one, there's like the audience is so immersed that they're gonna be scared for a minute that the world's gonna blow up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're gonna get to it and they're gonna be like, oh, that was satisfying.
Well, the fact that there is a part 2 makes me wonder if they're gonna go like that Infinity War route, where like, dang, maybe the guy that Ethan Hunt is up again is gonna win this one, and then he's gonna have to fix it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I don't know. It could.
You haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah,
you got to get out there. I mean, I haven't seen it, but you of all people,
we're recording this a couple weekends after it's come out, so I apologize to our listeners that I haven't seen it yet. It's just gotta go. I plan on to. I'm not gonna skip it.
You call yourself an action fan? You don't even see Dead Reckoning, you piece of crap.
I'm trying to think I'm like I said, I'm trying to be the action mega fan, and I feel like I'm leaving so many things out. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that needs to be. The thing that I'm thinking I need to like mention right now is Christopher Nolan's movies, right? In some of his recent ones, Interstellar and Oppenheimer that just came out. He's going a little bit more on the dramatic route, but Inception is an action movie.
Yeah,
right?
it's like woke action.
Sure. Yeah,
yeah. It's like.
Well, this is what I say about Christopher Nolan.
Not woke to be offensive either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's conscious. like using that rap term.
Yeah.
It's like conscious action.
Yeah, it's Christopher Nolan writes movies that make you forget you're watching an action movie, right? Because they're so steeped in this sci-fi, twisted logic that is just like hard to understand at first sometimes, but then you figure it out. Yeah, I have to mention movies like Inception, like, the Dark Knight trilogy is an incredible form of like action movies that are, they're crime dramas, but there's action throughout.
Well, you're right. He masks them very well. If you talk to people that watched Interstellar is probably my favorite Chris Nolan movie.
Yeah.
There are people that are like, oh, the scene at the end with the bookshelf, or towards the end with the bookshelf where he's interacting with his daughter. No one talks about the scene where Matthew McConaughey is driving a jetpack into a black hole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh my gosh, that scene where he's interacting with the bookshelf. No, the dude jetpacked into a black hole. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, or Inception, right? Like everyone talks about the ending where he's spinning the top, or they think about like the buildings doubling over on each other, but no one remembers that Tom Hardy has a shootout with dudes in the frozen tundra for like half an hour. You know what I mean? Like there's plenty of action in there, and it's so fun. It's so fun to see genres interweave that way, and it's just such a cool way to tell a new story that hasn't been told before. I think I sound like a broken record. I think action gets this bad rap for being unoriginal and uninspired, but there are really awesome filmmakers out there that are finding a way to give it new life and tell new stories with it. And it deserves more credit than it's given.
Well, that here's the problem. The problem is that people need to redirect what they're praising, right? It's like if you watch, I don't know, let's go back to Chris Nolan, right? If you watch a Chris Nolan movie, you're going to praise the fact that, you know, there's a lot of heart in it. There's this and that, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, that's cinema. That is cinema.
Yeah.
But then what was the new Guy Ritchie movie called? The Covenant or
The
something?
Covenant, yeah.
Okay. So like in The Covenant, I've never seen it, but I'm just saying
It's awesome.
people need to, I'm sure The Covenant has more heart in it.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing that people need to appreciate in action is like the balancing act, the coordination, and the setup, the logistics of making those scenes possible.
Yeah.
And not just being like, what am I supposed to take away from a 2-minute car chase in Paris, France? It's like, what did it take to make that scene for you to consume?
Yeah.
That's what people should be praising with action. They should be praising the creation of said scenes and not always what the scene is conveying.
Yeah. Or the fact that it's just magnetic. You know, it's like not every scene needs to make you feel something, but the fact that the scene you cannot pull your eyes away from because of the spectacle, that's, I mean, you know, in our second episode, we talked about Man in the Hat, right? The movie that me and Dylan made inspired by Alfred Hitchcock. And we did a bunch of research, right, about Alfred Hitchcock, and he had the idea of pure cinema, right? And I don't think we mentioned in this episode, but one thing that he said in one of these interviews that I watched that made me so excited was he said, the chase. He said, the chase is pure cinema. And it's because you can't do it over radio. You can't do it in a book. You can't do it on the stage. He's like, a chase scene is pure cinema, right? Because it can only be conveyed through the medium of film.
Visual only.
Right. And
it can be complemented by audio, whatever.
Yeah.
But at its core, it's something you are watching.
It's unique.
You're watching it.
It's unique to film. And so to hear, you know, when I watched that sitting there as like an action film being affirmed by Alfred Hitchcock, I was like, you're right, Al. You know, like that's
Al.
Yeah, Alfie. Like I was like, thank you for like affirming my love of action movies. It's like The Chase is, it's pure cinema, right? And I think people need to realize that a little bit more.
People need to shut their mouths. We're getting to the end here.
Yep.
Okay. I want to know, you know, do you like where action is going? Do you wish that there would be other things injected into it? It's something that you adore. Do you think there are things that could breathe new life into this genre, or do you think that it's already going that way?
I think action is doing just fine. You know, like we said, it's the genre that makes the most money, right? Like the Bond movie and the Mission Impossible movie, they're going to make a ton of money. I think I don't wish anything for action, and I don't expect anything for action. As like a film liker and a film lover, I just need to do more research and go find those, like I said, self-contained action movies, you know? I don't feel entitled to anything from the action genre. It's giving me a lot of good stuff. If I want something new from it, I got to go find it because it's out there. You know what I mean? Like I just discovered Thief, which came out in 1980 in 2023, right? So if I need anything new from action, it's out there. I just have to go find it. So I'm totally content with the way action movies are being made. Like I said, it's not a stale genre, right? Like filmmakers are finding ways to inject new, you know, stunts, new chases, new moments that get me out of my seat, you know, and new stories. So I'm completely happy and content with my experience as an action film lover.
And obviously you're not going to be like pushing a boulder on top of the people that disagree with you. But if you had any advice for people that are struggling to appreciate it, is there something you could tell them? Like maybe some advice you can give someone, things to look out for, things to admire, things to consider. Me, for example, I'm not into the modern action. Mm-hmm. What would you say to someone like me that, you know, I don't know, what should I be looking for?
To anybody who's really stuffy about action movies, you know, I would say, like I said, movies are meant for entertainment, you know? movies are art, and a lot of filmmakers use their art to convey a message, right? To make you feel something. But at the end of the day, it's still supposed to be entertainment, right? So get out of your own butt a little bit and just allow yourself to be entertained. That's number one, right? Number two is the more I've like researched action movies and learned about what makes them tick, there's this really interesting idea about problem solving within action movies. You see it in fight scenes, you see it in chase scenes. It's where each person on opposite sides of the fight has to solve problems while during a fight scene, right? It's, think of the Bruce Lee Chuck Norris fight. It's Chuck Norris fights a certain way, so Bruce Lee has to figure him out and do something different. And then Chuck Norris realizes he's being countered. It's if you really look at a chase scene and really look at a fight scene and go, I don't get it, try to find the problem solving within those scenes. And you'll realize, oh shoot, there's character development within fight scenes, at least in some of the best action movies, right? Characters are solving problems, right? They're being resourceful. It's if you're watching an action movie and don't think that it's cool or don't think that it's unique or interesting, try to pick out the ways that each character is solving problems within the bigger plot problem that they're facing. And I think you might get a little bit more enjoyment and a little bit more like, oh, cool. You'll notice things you hadn't noticed before. Having learned that a little bit about action movies, I watch things and I'm like, oh man, he just solved a problem that came up 30 seconds ago or that came up, 20 minutes. It's a way to like analyze things in a little bit deeper way that gets you more out of it. I don't know. Maybe that's overblown. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It makes total sense.
Okay.
And I think also just at its core, it's beautiful to, I don't know, appreciate something that while action is very conventional, it's very common. It's also like not common to admire it. And I think if you can find a way to admire something that is a little unconventional in terms of admiration, that's beautiful. I think you can take that and apply that to so many things. It's like, if I can just go into this, have a good time, and appreciate just the experience, I don't know. It's like maybe people dig a little too deep sometimes when it's not necessary,
Yeah. And so I will say one more thing. If you want to poo-poo on action, go watch your favorite movie. Go watch it right now. I bet you your favorite part of that movie is when there's a threat of violence on the table. Right? It's when the two dudes are sitting across from each other at the coffee table and they both have guns. Right? That's probably your favorite part of the movie, right?
Trying to talk a little Alfred Hitchcock again.
That was actually a reference to Heat with Robert De Niro or in Dumb and Dumber. We've talked about Dumb and Dumber. Some of the funniest lines and interactions in that whole movie is when, Mr. Samsonite has a gun to Harry and Lloyd, right? Like it's those moments of action and tension are probably some of your favorite moments of other genre movies. So why don't you chew on that for a minute?
Why don't you chew on that and tell me how refreshing
how
it
it
is.
tastes. Yeah. How refreshing.
Awesome. Well, I think this went really, really well. I don't know. I'm interested to see what people think. I'm interested to do the next one as well. Because,
I'm excited for that one.
Because that one is near and dear to my heart. Just like this one is super near and dear to your heart.
Yep.
And I think the next one's also kind of near and dear to your heart in some ways, especially now.
Yeah. It's definitely a subject that I've grown to love in the past couple of years that I had almost no exposure to. So I'll much like in our video game episode, I'm going to bring a novice perspective to this next episode. So I'm excited for that one.
That's cool.
Yep.
Well, do you have anything you want to add before we sign off, or?
Nope. Just realized if you ever see Alek at the gym going hard, it's probably because he has a little bit of delusion in his heart that he could be the next action superstar and that he needs those muscles in order to do it.
And the best thing you can do is to just let him believe what he wants to believe.
Just let me believe it.
Yeah,
don't take my dream away from me.
No. Encourage him and walk away. Give him a thumbs up because he has his headphones in.
Yep.
Give him a thumbs up, smile at him, and point at him and go, "You're killing it."
Killing it, dude.
And he's going to see you mouth the words. He's going to feel really confident and just walk away.
Yep.
Awesome.
And then as I walk out of the gym, it explodes behind me and I don't look at the explosion.
Yeah. And the person that gave you props was secretly still in there.
Oh, no.
Sitting on the toilet.
That was the bomb that was dropped.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the bomb dropped. All right.
Yeah, this is fun, Dylan. I'm glad that we got back in here to record these last couple. It's been a good time.
I know. It's I feel like the Tin Man a little bit. You know,
Yeah,
I needed
shaking
a
off
little
the rust.
oil.
Yep.
You know, but yeah, I think we're doing great.
Yep.
And we're gonna, you know what? Full transparency here. We're actually gonna record episode 12, the final episode, right after this one, and we will see you next week on the Very Refreshing Podcast.
Thank you for checking out the Very Refreshing Podcast. Subscribe for more content just like this.